The sun was hanging low over the Montana prairie, painting everything in that long golden light I've loved for 72 years. I was sitting on the porch swing, the old wood creaking a familiar tune, when my daughter-in-law, Sarah, Wayne's wife, brought me out a glass of iced tea. "Thought you might be parched, Clint," she said, her smile as polished as the silver buckle on her belt. "Mighty kind," I grunted, taking the glass. We made small talk for a minute about the hay yield and the stubborn hinge on the south pasture gate, the kind of talk that fills space without saying a thing. I let a comfortable silence settle between us, just watching the dust motes dance in the light. Then I sighed, a deep, weary sound that came right from my boots. I shook my head slowly, like a man burdened by the weight of memory. "You know, Sarah," I started, my voice gravelly and low, "this land, it holds all your history, your joys and your regrets." I took a slow sip of the tea, letting the condensation cool my rough hands. "I got a regret that's been sitting heavy on me, one I ain't never told a soul." Her polite attention sharpened. She perched on the porch rail, a picture of concerned family. "You can tell me, Clint." I looked out past the fence line, my eyes seeing not the grazing herd, but a ghost from 1968. Back before I met Wayne's mama, there was a woman, over in Billings. It was a whirlwind thing, wrong, but powerful. I paused, mastering the art of the hesitant confession. "Well, it resulted in a son." Sarah's glass froze halfway to her lips. "I never knew," I continued, my tone soaked in false sorrow. "She never told me, found out just a few years back. He's a good man. Got my eyes, they tell me." I let my gaze drop to the worn floorboards. "I've been making it right, changed my will, this whole spread, the savings. It's all gonna go to him, to my boy. It's the only decent thing to do." When I finally looked up, the change in her face was like watching a thunderhead roll across a clear sky. That polite, attentive mask didn't just slip, it shattered. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving two bright spots of panic high on her bones. Her eyes, wide and darting, couldn't settle. She was looking at me, but she was seeing her future, Wayne's future, the future she'd been counting on, evaporating like a puddle on a hot August day. Her smile became a stiff, terrible thing. I I see," she managed, her voice thin as paper. She set her glass down with a sharp click. "That's quite a story." The barely concealed panic was right there, swimming in her eyes. She stood up abruptly, smoothing her jeans with trembling hands. "I should check on dinner." And just like that, she was gone, retreating into the house, leaving me alone on the porch with the setting sun and the first sweet taste of my revenge. The hook was set. Now I just had to wait for Wayne to start pulling on the line. The screen door slams behind me with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet evening. I stand there on the porch, Clint, watching the dust settle on the long, empty driveway. It's been an hour since Wayne left, and the silence he left behind is heavier than any bale of hay I've ever lifted. This ranch. My ranch. 200 acres of good Texas earth that my father left me, and his father left him. It stretches out from this old house like a faded green blanket, beautiful and bleeding me dry. Every fence post I repair, every sick calf I nurse, feels like another dollar borrowed from a future I'm not sure I have. The bank statements live in a drawer in the kitchen, and I don't need to look at them to feel their weight. I walk inside, the floorboards groaning under my boots. It's too big for one man. Always has been, since Martha passed. The silence in here isn't peaceful. It's accusatory. It echoes with all the plans we had, the laughter we thought would fill these rooms. Now it just feels like a waiting room, and all it's waiting for is him. Wayne, my boy. The words feel strange in my mind now, like trying on a coat that doesn't fit anymore. He was all elbows and excitement once, following me around, wanting to learn the name of every horse. Now, when he comes out here, his eyes don't see the land. They appraise it. They measure the barn not for its shelter, but for its potential square footage. He looks at the old oak by the creek, and I swear he's calculating board feet. It wasn't always this way. Or maybe it was, and I was just too blind to see it. The change was slow, like rust. Then he married her. I won't even say her name in my own house. She's the catalyst, the whisper in his ear that turned avarice into a mission. They don't call to ask how I am. They call to ask about the property tax, about the mineral rights, about my plans for the asset. They sit in their modern house in the city, and I can feel them waiting. Not for a phone call from their old man, but for a phone call about their old man. They're vultures, the both of them, perched on their power lines, watching for the first sign of weakness. They don't see a home or a legacy. They see a liquidation event. I pour a glass of water, not whiskey. I need a clear head. Staring out the window at my land, the land that is my soul and my millstone, I make a quiet promise to myself. They're waiting for an inheritance. But I'm not dead yet. And this ranch, for all its troubles, is still mine. The air in Wayne's study had started to feel different. It wasn't just the smell of old leather and cigars anymore. It was thick with a new, quiet desperation. His wife, Eleanor, had always been polite, distant. But lately her eyes followed me. It started with a casual question over dinner. "Clint, you travel so much for Wayne," she'd said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "Do you ever have people waiting for you back home?" I shrugged, taking a sip of wine. Here and there, nothing permanent. That was the first thread. I gave it a gentle tug. A week later, she cornered me by the grand piano. "A man like you must have stories," she murmured, pretending to admire a sheet of music. "Any family to speak of?" I let a shadow pass over my face, just for a second. "Had a son once, long time ago." I didn't elaborate. I just let the words hang there, heavy and unfinished. That's when the obsession truly took root. Her questions became more frequent, more pointed, but always wrapped in that brittle, polite concern. "What was his name, your boy?" she asked one afternoon, her fingers nervously straightening a vase of lilies. "John," I said, then later, "Michael." I made sure the details never matched. One time I said he was 6 when I lost touch. The next I hinted he'd be a teenager now. I watched the confusion and paranoia stitch itself into the fabric of her mind. She was trying to solve a puzzle where I kept changing the picture on the box. Elias, my steady ally, provided the final piece. "It needs to feel discovered, not delivered," he'd advised, handing me the single most important prop, the forged birth certificate. The paper was aged perfectly. The ink faded just so. It bore a name that wasn't quite the ones I'd given her, but close enough. Jonathan M. It listed no mother, only a father, Clint. My moment came when Eleanor mentioned clearing out the old storage closet. "So many of Wayne's forgotten things," she sighed. I knew the lockbox was in there, a dusty relic from Wayne's early days. During a visit, I slipped the folded certificate between some old blank stock certificates at the very bottom. I didn't hide it well. I made it findable. 2 days later, I saw it. The change in her was instant, physical. She found me in the library, her face pale, the ghost of that document seeming to shimmer in her eyes. She didn't ask a question. She just stared, a silent, terrified confirmation of every paranoid fear I'd planted. "Is everything all right, Eleanor?" I asked, my voice the picture of innocent concern. She swallowed hard, managed a weak shake of her head, and walked away without a word. The hook was set. Wayne's fortress wasn't just being attacked from the outside anymore. Now the doubt was living in his home, sleeping in his bed, and it had a name he didn't even know, Jonathan. The money started vanishing first. I'd see Wayne's truck kicking up dust on the county road, heading toward Billings, and a few days later, a new piece of gaudy jewelry would appear on his daughter-in-law's hand. But this was different. This wasn't a bracelet. This was an investment. From my porch, with a cup of coffee going cold, I watched the pattern change. That sleek, unfamiliar sedan, too clean for our gravel roads, showed up at their place twice a week. A private investigator. I heard it from Elias at the feed store, who'd heard it from his cousin who tended bar in Billings. "City fellow," Elias muttered, loading sacks into my truck. "Asks a lot of questions about old records, property deeds, the kind that don't get asked for polite reasons." She'd hired him. I knew it in my bones. And she was spending Wayne's money to do it, thousands of it. The lie she fed Wayne was almost elegant in its simplicity. She was tracking down a substantial debt owed to the family, a final payoff from some dead relative's estate. Wayne, whose mind these days was more on his aching joints and the price of diesel, just grunted and told her not to waste his time with the details. But I saw the details. I made it my business to see. I'd be in town pretending to look at tractor parts, and I'd see her through the diner window, leaning across a table toward that investigator. A sharp-faced man in a cheap suit, her expression frantic, her hands moving like trapped birds. The search wasn't going well. Whatever paper trail she was following, it kept disappearing into the Montana dust, just like I'd always intended. The beautiful, terrible irony was that every hour that investigator billed, every mile he charged for, was another drain on Wayne's accounts. She was using the villain's own treasure to fund the hunt for the one thing that could destroy him, that forged birth certificate, tucked away in my safe. I'd nod at Wayne if I passed him, playing the part of the oblivious, dim-witted neighbor. "Heard you got some business in the city," I'd say. "Woman's business," he'd grumble, shaking his head. "Money down a hole, if you ask me." He had no idea how right he was. I'd just smile, a slow, country smile that didn't reach my eyes. Let her search, I thought, watching that sedan slink away from their property again. Let her spend. The more frantic she gets, the more it costs him. And the closer she thinks she is, the less she's actually seeing. The pressure was building, but it was building in their house, with their money. All I had to do was watch and wait, and pretend I didn't know a thing. The silence in my apartment was starting to feel like a physical weight. I'd been jumping at every phone call, scrutinizing every unfamiliar car on the street. The lie was a live wire I'd touched, and now I couldn't let go. I needed to tell someone, or I was going to short circuit. That's when Elias showed up, unannounced. My oldest friend, the guy who'd been my roommate in college and was now my lawyer. He took one look at me, at the unwashed coffee cups and the blinds perpetually drawn, and didn't ask if I was okay. He already knew I wasn't. "Clint," he said, his voice low and serious, cutting through the static in my head. "You look like hell. Talk to me. What's going on?" I tried to brush it off, to give him some line about work stress, but the words wouldn't come. The guilt was a pressure cooker, and Elias was the release valve. I broke. The whole story tumbled out in a messy, shameful rush. Wayne's smug face, my stupid, impulsive boast in the bar, the trip to the shady print shop, the forged birth certificate I'd planted like a time bomb. I watched the color drain from his face. He didn't interrupt, just listened with this growing horror in his eyes that made me feel smaller and more wretched with every word. When I finished, the silence returned, heavier than before. He ran a hand over his face. "Clint, my God. Do you have any idea what you've done? This isn't some prank. This is fraud. This is a career-ending, life-ruining kind of stupid." "I know," I whispered, the words barely audible. "I know. It's already ruining it. I can't sleep. I can't think. He hired a guy, Elias, an investigator." Elias stared at me for a long moment, his lawyer brain clearly warring with his friend's heart. He let out a long, weary sigh. Okay. Listen to me. You don't talk to anyone. You don't breathe a word of this to anyone. You understand? You just live your normal, boring life." "What are you going to do?" I asked, a flicker of desperate hope cutting through the dread. "I'm going to help you monitor this," he said, his voice all business now. "Discreetly. I have some contacts. I can keep an ear to the ground, see what this investigator is turning up. But Clint, I am only doing this to contain the damage you've caused. This stays between us. I am now the only person on Earth who knows this truth, and that is how it will remain." Having an ally, even a horrified and reluctant one, was like taking my first full breath in weeks. Over the next few days, Elias would call with updates. His tone was always grim, but the news was miraculously good. "He's hitting walls," Elias reported one evening. "The paper trail ends at a records office that had a minor fire 5 years ago. A lot of documents were lost or damaged." Another call. "He's trying to track down a supposed midwife from a rural county. She retired to Florida a decade ago and passed away last year." Dead end after dead end. The false history I'd created was holding. Not because it was brilliant, but because it was built in the gaps of real-world chaos and lost information. Each update from Elias was a temporary relief, a stay of execution, but we both knew the investigator was still out there, and Wayne was still paying him. The clock was still ticking, just slower now. And the only thing between me and disaster was my oldest friend, who looked at me now not just with friendship, but with a profound and weary disappointment. The sun was beating down on the front yard of my ranch, but the heat I felt was coming from the woman screaming in my face. Elias stood a few paces behind me, a silent, solid wall of support. "You liar! You thief!" she shrieked, waving a sheaf of papers. "Thousands. We paid that investigator thousands. And for what?" Her face was contorted with a rage I'd never seen. "His final report says it all. The sun doesn't exist. You fabricated the whole thing." This was the daughter-in-law, the one who'd been so eager to believe in the lost heir, so long as it meant getting Wayne's land. Now that the professional she'd hired had dug up nothing but empty records, her investment had vanished, and her fury had a new target: me. I didn't fabricate anything, I said, my voice low and steady, though my heart was hammering against my ribs. I told you what I found. The certificate. A forgery, she spat, cutting me off. A pathetic, cheap forgery you probably made yourself. You saw a grieving, confused old man, and you saw your payday. Before I could answer, the familiar rumble of Wayne's truck tore up the gravel drive. He slammed the door and stomped over, his face a storm cloud of confusion. He looked from her hysterical form to my calm one. What in God's name is going on here? Wayne demanded. I got a call saying to come out here, that it was an emergency. It is an emergency. The daughter-in-law turned her venom on him. He played us. This whole long-lost son story was a scam to get you to sign over the land to him for safekeeping. The investigator proved it. There is no son. Wayne's eyes, usually so gentle and lost, sharpened with a painful, dawning anger. He looked at me, betrayed. Clint, is this true? You made up my boy? The weight of that question, the raw hurt in it, was almost worse than her screaming. I thought of the forged birth certificate, the key object in my safe. It was real, but the story behind it was a lie I was trapped in. Wayne, listen to me, I started. But the daughter-in-law wasn't finished. He's a fraud, and you, she pointed a shaking finger at Wayne. You signed papers because of his fairy tale. We're ruined because of this ranch hand's fantasy. Now they were both staring at me, one with fiery accusation, the other with the crushing disappointment of a shattered dream. The investigator's report lay between us, a physical declaration that the hope I'd helped nurture was built on nothing. I was cornered, not by a villain in the shadows, but by the devastating consequences of a lie I'd tried to navigate, with the truth I actually knew feeling more dangerous than ever to reveal. The confrontation wasn't over, it had just begun, and I was at the very center of the storm. The air in my mother's formal living room was so thick with her triumph you could almost taste it. Wayne stood by the fireplace, a smug little smile playing on his lips, already counting the money he thought was his. My mother was looking at me with that familiar dismissive pity, the kind she reserved for my life's greatest disappointments. It's over, Clint, she said, her voice smooth as silk. The lawyers have the documentation. There's nothing left to fight for. I took a slow, deep breath, feeling the weight of my phone in my pocket. Elias had texted me just 5 minutes ago. All files received and backed up, ready when you are. Is that so? I said, my voice unnervingly calm, even to my own ears. I saw a flicker of uncertainty in Wayne's eyes. He wasn't used to calm from me. Before we declare anything over, there's something I think you both need to hear. I pulled out my phone. You see, the last time we were in this room, when you so generously offered me a pittance to disappear, I had a feeling the conversation might be instructive. I tapped the screen. So I recorded it. The color drained from my mother's face. You what? I hit play. Her own voice, crystal clear and dripping with venom, filled the silent room. I've spent a fortune, Wayne. A fortune on investigators, on lawyers, on that fool's errand to find some phantom heir based on that ridiculous old letter, all to make sure not a single cent goes to that ungrateful man. Wayne took a step forward, but I held up a hand, my eyes locked on my mother. The recording continued, her detailing the financial hunt for a person who didn't exist, her contempt for me laid bare for the three of us to hear. I stopped the playback. The silence now was deafening. But a recording is just hearsay, isn't it? I said quietly. I swiped on my phone, pulling up the documents Elias had helped me secure. I turned the screen toward them. These are the bank statements, the transfers, the payments to private eyes tracing a ghost, all while the accounts meant for my father's legacy were being systematically drained. I zoomed in on a particularly large sum, paid to a firm with a notoriously shady reputation. You weren't protecting the family, Mother. You were funding a wild goose chase fueled by greed. You spent our family's money not to secure it, but to steal it from a son you've decided is unworthy. She was speechless, her carefully constructed mask of righteous indignation shattered. Wayne looked at her, his smugness replaced by a dawning horror, not for her, but for his own slipping cut of the prize. Her greed wasn't just a feeling in the room anymore. It was a spoken confession, a documented trail. It was laid bare, ugly and undeniable, on the polished table between us, and for the first time I saw not a formidable opponent, but a desperate, hollow woman who had gambled everything and just lost. The vinyl of the booth seat creaked as I shifted my weight. Across from me, Elias gave a small, steadying nod. Around us, at their usual tables, were a few of the town's fixtures, Old Man Henderson nursing his coffee, and the Miller sisters sharing a slice of pie. This was the right place, quiet, public, real. I cleared my throat, the sound too loud in the quiet diner. There's something I need to set straight, I began, my voice rough. All eyes drifted to me, curious. I laid the single damning piece of paper on the Formica table, the forged birth certificate. This right here? This is a ghost, a very expensive ghost. I pointed a calloused finger at the name on it. My son's wife, she got it in her head that I had a secret child, an heir out there somewhere, who'd steal what she thought was hers. I looked at Elias, remembering the long nights of digging. She hired investigators, lawyers, spent a fortune I didn't even know she had access to, chasing this fiction. Henderson put his mug down softly. Wayne did that. Wayne, I confirmed, the name bitter. She was hunting for a person who never existed, all because she saw my land, my house, and dollar signs. She wasted more money trying to find this phantom than she ever spent asking if I needed anything from the grocery store. I let that hang in the air, the sheer cold absurdity of it. Think about that. A fortune gone, not on care, not on family, on greed, on a hunt for a ghost because the idea of sharing an inheritance was a poison in her mind. One of the Miller sisters, Ruth, shook her head, her lips a thin line. All that effort, just for money? Just for money, I echoed, tapping the certificate. This proves it. It's a fake, crafted to start the whole sick search. It was never about family. It was never about me. It was about an estate. It was about clearing a path to what she thought she deserved. I looked at each of them, these people who'd known me for decades. If she cared a lick for me, that money would have been a different kind of tool. It could have been help. It could have been comfort. Instead, it was fuel for a conspiracy she built in her own head. I finally sat back, the truth, now public, feeling less like a weight and more like a settled fact. So that's the scheme, the whole ugly thing. She showed her hand, chasing a shadow, and it showed me everything I needed to know. She didn't lose a son and see a father grieving. She saw a lockbox, and she was willing to burn down everything to find the key. A heavy, understanding silence filled the diner, broken only by the soft hum of the refrigerator. The evidence was there on the table, not just of the forgery, but of a heart so consumed by greed it would rather chase a phantom than cherish a living soul. The silence in the town hall after the gavel fell was the loudest sound I'd ever heard. It was the sound of a lie collapsing in on itself. I just stood there, the forged birth certificate feeling like a live wire in my hand, as I watched the color drain from her face. All her grand plans, her whispered manipulations, they evaporated right there in front of the whole town. She was left with nothing. Not the inheritance she'd schemed for, not the sympathy she'd cultivated, and certainly not her dignity. The mask was off, and everyone had seen the real person underneath. The hum was immediate, a low, angry murmur of neighbors realizing how they'd been played. I saw people she'd called friends turn their backs, literally walking away from her. The town's shunning wasn't a decree. It was a quiet, collective turning of the shoulder. She was now a ghost in the place she'd tried to own. But the hardest thing to watch was Wayne. My brother didn't yell. He just looked at her, and I saw a decade of his life, our lives, pass behind his eyes. He saw the secret loans she'd taken out against the family business, the debts she'd hidden, the financial hole she'd dug while smiling to his face. The love in his eyes didn't turn to hate. It just dissolved. It was like watching a light go out. He simply said, "It's over," his voice flat and final, and he walked out. He left her standing there, utterly alone in the center of the room she'd chosen for her triumph. Our relationship, mine and Wayne's, lay in pieces around us. It was shattered by her poison, but maybe, for the first time, the pieces were clean. They were the truth. There was no villain left to twist them. As the crowd filtered out, Elias put a steadying hand on my shoulder. "It's done, Clint," he said quietly. I just nodded, my eyes on Wayne's retreating back. Later, Wayne found me at the old workshop. He didn't say much. He just picked up a sanding block and started working on the same piece of oak I was. No words of apology, no grand speeches, just the shared, familiar sound of work. It was raw and it was painful, but it was honest. For the first time in years, there was no her, no whispered version of events, just the two of us and the quiet. The rebuild between us has begun. It will be slow and the scars will show, but they'll be our scars, not hers. The poison is finally gone. The sun was dipping behind the distant hills, painting the sky in streaks of orange and purple, and for the first time in what felt like forever, the ranch was quiet. Not just silent, but peaceful. A deep settled quiet that seeped into the old wood of the porch where I sat. Wayne was gone, not just from the property, but from our lives. The law had him on charges that had nothing to do with me, and everything to do with the man he truly was. Elias settled into the chair beside me, the familiar creak a comforting sound. I handed him a mug of coffee, the steam curling into the cool evening air. He took it, shook his head, and a wry, tired smile touched his lips. "Never a dull moment with you, Clint," he said, his voice gravelly. "I've branded cattle, mended fences in hailstorms, and pulled a calf from a ditch at midnight. But I have never, in all my years, had to help a friend fake a legal document." I let out a breath that was almost a laugh. "Wasn't my finest hour, Elias." "No," he agreed, taking a sip. "But it was your most necessary one." My eyes drifted to the metal trash can sitting in the middle of the dusty yard. Inside it, the forged birth certificate, the lie that had saved my home, was curling into blackened ash, the edges glowing orange with embers. We'd watched it catch, the flames hungrily consuming the paper that had borne my name and a date that wasn't mine. It had been the key to proving Wayne's intent to steal, the trap that snapped shut when he thought he'd found his leverage. A lie to reveal the truth, I murmured, more to myself than to him. Elias nodded. "Sometimes a mirror has to be held up, even if the glass is clouded." He showed everyone exactly who he was when he thought he had you cornered. The document was just the frame around that picture. I leaned back in my chair, the weight that had been sitting on my chest for months finally gone. The ranch was secure. The deed was clear. The fight was over. I watched the last of the paper dissolve into smoke that drifted up, fading into the twilight. It felt like a ritual, burning that false thing. Letting go of the weapon so I could remember I wasn't a man who needed to arm himself with lies. The first stars began to prick through the deep blue overhead. Here on my land, with the scent of dust and juniper and burned paper in the air, and with a true friend sitting in silence beside me, I was at peace. The greater truth wasn't in a piece of paper. It was in this quiet, in this safety, in knowing what you're willing to fight for, and who you're willing to fight beside. I took a slow sip of coffee and let the quiet hold me. It was over, and it was enough.